Welcome to Exploring Monterey Bay, airing bi-weekly on, of course, KSQD and KSQT. I'm your host, Mathilde Rand. My guests are Sally Gray, Alan Ritch, and Laurie Corn. They all have been recurring contributors to First Person Singular, a 2-minute commentary program on KSQD that airs Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays around 7:57 a.m. and 5:57 p.m. Each writer records around 240 words, which can be read in around 90 seconds. In this program, we will share one piece from each of my guests and discuss others they have recorded. Welcome, Laurie. Welcome, Sally. And welcome, Alan.
Yeah,
welcome, Mathilde.
Hi.
Good to be here.
We're going to start each of them introducing themselves, and then we play one of their pieces. Sally, would you like to start?
Sure. I hail from South Dakota, and I got a degree in writing from Colorado State University. I've been writing since, well, my dog died when I was 6, and I wrote my first story about that. So it's been a long time. Oh, Sandy was a good dog.
She was a good dog.
Yes.
Yeah. And so you've been writing how long for First Person Singular?
About 3 years now, I think.
Yeah? And you guys remember any of her pieces?
Oh, of course.
Yes, of course.
Well, let's play one.
Sally Gray has an obsession with buttons.
My shopping partner in the antique store looked at me askance, but I clutched the zinc-lidded antique mason jar and shook my head. I'm buying these buttons and no one can stop me, I proclaimed, steaming toward the check stand. My mother kept a button box, an emerald green tin, its lid slightly askew that made opening or closing the box a challenge for my small fingers. I had to ask Mother to open the box, and then she watched carefully as I spread my treasure across her chenille bedspread. Since the episode with the jelly bean that I shoved up my nose, necessitating a trip to the emergency room, my mother had been watchful in this way. Sometimes I separated buttons by color, by shape, or by composition, but this day I wanted to count them. I had mastered counting to 20, so my mother helped me count first to 100, on to 200, and then, when my enthusiasm flagged, nearly to 500 before the final button. Mother watched carefully as I scooped and gathered buttons in my pudgy hands. I relished the clink, thud, tap, tap, tap of the buttons finding home in the tin box. With that memory in my ears, I turned to my friend in the antique store to proclaim, "You can't ever have too many buttons." My friend simply raised her eyebrows and placed an assortment of brass keys on the counter.
That was a little singer at the end.
On the button.
I have to tell you, not much of that really happened. To pull back the
Fiction.
curtain. My mother had a button box, and I stuck a jelly bean up my nose, and the rest I created to make the story.
So you're not only telling parts of your life, but you're actually creating stories yourself.
Yes. I usually send the recordings to my friends and family. I got more comments on the button box than anything else I've done so far. It touched a chord with people. The memorabilia, the nostalgia. Everyone had a button box, and everyone remembers a parent or a grandmother attached to that memory.
And is it always a button, or is it keys? Or
Well, it could be keys. It could be a collection of any kind, really.
Huh. Do you recognize that?
I never had a button box.
Nor did I.
Oh, you two, you've missed out.
I know.
But you do have other things that you've collected.
Yes, many.
Many things.
Far too many. My apartment's overflowing with objects.
And first person singular.
Yes.
Yes.
Did you listen to any of her other pieces, and do you have any comments about what she's writing about?
I just like all your very personal pieces, your personal stories. That's what I love.
So you do a lot about also your family, right?
Yes. One of my favorites is about the day that Kennedy died.
Yeah.
It really is poignant for me. And most of that really did happen. If you ask people, where were you when this happened, most people have a reference for that. Or where were you when the earthquake happened? Most of the people around here have a reference for that.
And you had another Kennedy in a story of you became a Democrat.
Yes.
Right? Yes.
Shaking hands with Bobby Kennedy.
That made a connection to me because I was in Los Angeles when he was assassinated 2 days before I was to get married.
Oh, boy.
And we had to decide whether to go ahead with the wedding and we did. But we said prayers for Bobby and we missed him terribly.
Yeah.
Are you telling us, Sally, that because you met Bobby Kennedy, you became a Democrat?
Yes, absolutely.
That's the story.
The Democratic Party needs to return to its roots.
Yeah.
Good point.
So, and that's one of the things also that you can do on first person singular. You can do a political comment. And you have recorded Jason Scores. He does a lot of political stuff.
That's right. Jason is one of the most fluent political writers ever. He never runs out of what to say.
Well, anything else for Sally before we go on to Alan?
I think I'm complete.
Yeah.
You're
Oh,
complete.
you mean first person singular makes you complete?
Yes.
Oh, listeners, you hear that?
This is a moment.
You write for first person singular and you become complete.
I have to say it's really been a challenge sometimes because I'll have an idea and I'll sit down and I'll brainstorm and I'll get maybe 200 words. And then to go back and decide what did I really want to write about is the hard part. And I send it to Mathilde and she says, well, almost there.
Not in that way, of course, but you interpret it that way.
Yes.
Alan.
Okay, so I do have a lot in common with Sally. I too grew up on a farm, maybe 5,000 miles away from your farm in the middle of England. And I had the misfortune of being born at the early stage of the Second World War. And the Germans, according to my father, tried to destroy me early and instead destroyed the nearby town of Coventry. And he always said, they were trying to get you, Alan. Instead, they created duck ponds on our farm with a few stray bomb craters.
Oh, my gosh.
Anyway, I migrated to California in the 60s, my 20s, in search of a hippie lifestyle. Never went to university until I suddenly saw this place called Berkeley and decided that's where I wanted to go. And I ended up going there for about 10 years, studying geography. And that was transformative because I'd already traveled around the world a couple of times, but never really made much sense of it. And suddenly it all made sense when I learned how to read the landscape properly. And I've been doing that ever since. I'd just like to say quickly how I came to be telling these stories on the radio. I met Mathilde when we were both volunteers at a wonderful institution called Women Care. And I wrote a poem for their newsletter called Diamond Lanes. And she persuaded me that it could be prose, maybe it was already prose, and invited me to read it on KUSP. And that was the beginning of my long career on radio. Now I've done about 78 stories and enjoyed working with her very much. So,
Wow. So shall we play the Diamond Lane?
why don't you play the Diamond
why don't we
Lane?
play the Diamond Lane?
Alan Ritch tells us about the disadvantage of the Diamond Lane.
2 years ago, recovering from surgery and post-op radiation and enduring the lonely aftermath of a difficult divorce, I realized that the best therapy for depression and despair was volunteering to help others. My discovery of Women Care, an organization that serves women cancer patients, was the light at the end of my tunnel. Driving Women Care clients to and from their medical appointments has led me through that tunnel, enlightened and inspired by passengers resolutely looking forward to whatever their own challenging journeys had in store for them. Side by side, encapsulated in my car, we share our stories of fear and joy, anxiety and enthusiasm. The road between Santa Cruz and Stanford is often too short to complete such intense conversations. To one stimulating client, I dedicated a poem called Diamond Lanes, in which I regretted taking advantage of her carpool qualifying company by using the fast outside lane on Highway 85 when the congested inside lanes would have given us more time together, time more precious than diamonds. Volunteering for Women Care is indeed a privilege beyond price. With every trip, I'm reminded of the value of life, love, kindness, and courage. I'm as grateful to this remarkable organization as the patients who benefit directly from its many services.
So that was your piece.
That was my chosen piece, and it was difficult because I realized that that was rather a sad piece. And most of my pieces tend to be ironic, and they tend to have a moral at the end of them, rather like Aesop's fables. I'm not sure I guess this one had a moral.
I think so.
I think it had a little irony, too, you talking about the diamond lane.
Oh, good.
I was inspired by it. I don't do much volunteering, and I thought, maybe I should do something like that. So, thank you.
What did you think about the pieces that you've heard from Alan? Well, he calls himself a cultural geographer.
I know, and I had to look that up
Yeah.
to find out what it actually is.
And what is
I
it?
told him, oh, now you're putting me on the
Oh,
spot.
I'm sorry. You studied geography,
Yeah?
Yes.
but that's lots to do with land and everything. But now your pieces are a lot about people. I mean, it really goes in depth into their thinking, their feelings, their understanding of life and living on this earth and their importance. And so that's why you called yourself a cultural geographer. I think it's a great term.
Well, as we cultural geographers often say, it covers everything. Land and life.
Land and life.
Yeah. And most of the pieces I do on people are people I've loved. Family, friends, and so on. It's wonderful to have the opportunity on the radio to pay tribute to them in their memory.
I loved your piece about the cowboy.
Oh, yeah.
I forgot the title
Yeah,
of it,
Dick.
but yes.
Dick, my cowboy hero.
Yeah. Oh, that's it, Cowboy Hero.
Yeah.
When do you get the notion to write about someone? How does that happen?
Usually it happens when I come across an anniversary of some kind, like I wrote about my mother-in-law around Thanksgiving, and I think it was broadcast around Thanksgiving because she died on a Thanksgiving a few years before. And my father-in-law died on Valentine's Day. Duh. So that was another obvious calendar tie-in. So, yeah.
And then recently, of course, you wrote about the closing of Mackenzie's Chocolates.
Yeah, that was the Christmas Day. Thank
That
you
was-
very much
that
for
was-
putting it on Christmas Day.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Well, let's go to Laurie.
Okay. Our backgrounds are very much the same. Alan, I moved to California in the 60s as well, the year after the Summer of Love. As far as what I have been doing in my life, I also was writing most of my life. I never actually majored in it in school, but I was always doing it, always writing stories or poetry. Actually majored in French. But after working at the university for quite a few years here, I retired and now have all the time in the world to do radio pieces and to write.
And you write a lot.
I write a lot.
And
Yeah.
you produce a lot.
You can't stop me. I call it being in a writing way. Everything triggers a writing. Just getting on a bus and looking at people. Just one thing triggers another, and it's just hard to stop.
And for First Person Thinker, you also produce people's pieces.
Yeah, the very first time I did a piece, Margie Kern-Marshall, who was the recruiter for the station, asked me to come and do a piece. I got so excited. I wrote and I perfected every word and I rehearsed it over and over. This was my one time on the radio. After I finished, they said, "Oh, do you want to do some more?" I was, "Do some more? I get to do some more?" And then they said, "Do you want to learn how to produce the pieces?" I said, "Are you kidding? You mean learn to make sound waves and balance them?" And that's when I became a programmer, too. So I get to see it from both ends. I get to do the pieces and put them together for other people, help them edit them if they need editing, make all the sounds balance, the introductions with the speaker, with the music. It's just a lot of fun.
Right. Well, before we go listen to your piece, I want to remind people that they're listening to Exploring Monterey Bay on KSQD 90.7, 89.7, and 89.5, and of course online at ksqd.org. So let's listen to Laurie's piece, which is called Hanukkah.
The holidays were a time of unparalleled glory for my 6th grade teacher, Mrs. Utes. As we rehearsed for the annual PTA program, she would stand at the head of the class, jaw thrust out, small wiry frame poised like a conductor, and we would bellow out our hallelujahs for Mrs. Utes and the whole Christmas world. I ached for the music of Christmas, voices of angels and organ music echoing through the vaulted arches of cathedrals. Of course, I loved Hanukkah, but why was our music so devoid of the glory, the holy angels, the hallelujahs? Why was it so minor? I sat in my room in tears, a book of Christmas carols in front of me, and with a grim and sorrowful determination, I memorized every word of every carol. My fervor was well rewarded. For the PTA program, Mrs. Utes chose me to sing a duet of Silent Night in German with a huge boy with slick-back blonde hair named Sonny Willers. The night of the PTA, our voices rang out through the auditorium. That year, I learned that the world was big enough for it all. I could be star of the Christmas PTA and then return to the warmth of my home to light the candles on the brass menorah, chant the ancient Hebrew blessing, eat latkes, and enjoy the simple, sweet music, minor, of course.
And of course, it's the 5th day of Hanukkah, so I thought that was a
This year again,
Yeah.
Christmas and Hanukkah fall at the
I
same.
know, that's unusual.
It is amazing.
And you get presents every day?
That's how we always
Oh my
did
gosh,
it.
I'm going to
Yeah.
change.
Good reason to.
I got one last night.
You did, right?
A present last night.
Mm.
Aw,
All right.
happy Hanukkah.
Now, you write about a lot of different topics. How do you choose them?
They choose me. Almost everything I've done is personal, about people, about an experience. I've done a few political kind of things, prison reform and civil liberties, but mostly what I want to write about is just excerpts from life. I call them little snippets of life. It's almost like creating a living journal of your life. At my age, I think a lot about legacy. What am I going to leave? And that's what I'm going to leave, an audio living journal.
Did you listen to any of her pieces, and if you have any comment for her?
Yeah, I was particularly struck by the childhood memories because
Yeah.
I didn't know people could remember childhood that deeply. But yeah, it was
I was
great.
afflicted by never forgetting anything from my childhood.
Really?
So, unlike my story, yours are true.
Definitely.
So we talk about how you choose your topics. Have you ever been surprised about what came up and what you're writing about?
I actually have a very recent memory. I went down to Lompoc in middle of California to see the murals, and I thought that was just going to be a nice side trip. And I saw someone painting a mural, and it occurred to me that he might know something about Elon Musk's interest in Lompoc because of the SpaceX thing. So I said, what has Elon Musk done for Lompoc? And he said, broken a lot of windows. with the supersonic rockets taking off. And I thought, now there's a story, which I haven't done yet.
You haven't done it yet, so we can expect that.
You can. It will be called Walls and Windows.
I was walking the other day listening to a book, and it's about prehistoric times, people living in caves, and that connected to a memory of mine from, 50 years ago, being down in a cave, and that connected to being on Alcatraz Island and being in a blackout. So I wrote something about that, which I hope I will record soon.
Yeah, I hope so too.
So nothing I had planned, though, and just the connections are amazing.
Yeah.
I have a whole list of topics.
How about you? Did you surprise yourself?
Oh, definitely. I remember there was one time when I was just walking down Highway 9 north of Boulder Creek, and I ducked into this little grove of redwoods, and I decided I was going to stay there for an hour and remember every single thing about that place, just to remember for the rest of my life an ordinary memory, an ordinary thing, and an ordinary day. I never forgot any of it, just the sun and the trees, and so I decided to write about that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're on the radio, people listen. Sometimes we get responses, written responses by email, and most of the time they're very, very interesting, actually. But what responses have you received from people who have listened to your stories?
Almost none. I must confess there were so few that when Laurie kindly wrote a response a couple of years ago, I didn't notice it until a couple of days ago. Yes, that was my son. I'm sorry, my grandson, and I took the photograph of my grandson in answer to your question.
Now, recently, actually this morning, you got a response from someone who didn't listen to the radio necessarily, but...
Yeah, I actually disperse my stories indirectly by using that wonderful archive. And if I think someone might be interested in a story, I will send them the link.
Yeah.
And obviously, you always get a response then, because people are, whether they're telling you the truth or not, they thoroughly enjoy them.
Right, and that's why when they're recorded, they go on the website and they'll stay there on the blog. And then sometimes I send people links because they ask, I heard so-and-so, and can you send me a link? So I sent them a link. And that's when indeed people start giving the responses. Now, this morning you let somebody listen to one of your stories. Tell us that.
Oh, yes, my pedicurist was kind enough to listen to about 20 of my stories while she was working on my toes. And it was just wonderful because I reduced her to tears without even meaning to, but she was very sentimental about the stories. And she ended up by saying, do you know the Kitchen Sisters? I know that's on a rival radio station, perhaps. But
no, we have the Kitchen Sisters on Wednesdays.
Okay, well, Nikki is kind of an old friend, and Davia too. So it was a wonderful comment, and to be, not compared with them, but to evoke them in that setting was just
you're
wonderful.
part of the same community, KSQD.
You bet.
They are, and we are. So.
Yeah.
Any responses that...
I actually had one time. I did one about trying to learn Italian by reading a Berlitz book. That's how you learned a lesson back then.
Right.
And I memorized this one sentence that I just thought was so musical, and I would do the hand flailing and everything. When I was in Italy, I didn't have any place to use this because what it really meant was, is this a handkerchief or a lamp? So I finally had to use it on my last day, and I said it to a cab driver, and she cracked up. Somebody wrote in about that. They really liked that.
What do we have to do, Sally? Any responses?
Well, like I said, everybody loved the button box story. So,
Evidently.
yeah.
I can imagine that you write sometimes about your kids.
Yes.
Are those responses to your liking?
Yes.
Oh,
yes,
right.
Definitely.
Talking about that, what do you get out of writing for first person singular? What does it mean to you?
It gives me a focus for my writing. I'm usually writing all the time, but it's nice to have a goal. And I'll sit down and I'll look at my list of topics and tinker around with them. And when I get one finished, I feel really good about that. And then I cross my fingers and I send it to Mathilde.
Who is always very kind.
And she's kindly says yes or no.
Most of the time it's yes. Your writing is very good. I mean, all three of you have writings that I'm just amazed.
Oh, you're very kind.
Yes.
What I love about visiting you, and I'll come in with a sheaf of about 6, and we just rattle them off. And I keep waiting for her to say, do you mind moving that paragraph around and so on? I've already edited them fairly thoroughly. I usually start with about 300 words and whittle them down to 200, not 240, and get rid of lots of redundancy. And it's amazing how valuable that practice has been to my other writing as well. One of my ex-wives says, you used to be so long-winded.
So it even helps you in your daily life.
Well, to some extent. Maybe.
To some extent.
So we kind of write ourselves to the end, correct?
Exactly.
Well, I love to write, but my second love is editing. I love honing something down and getting rid of every single extra syllable that doesn't need to be there. And I enjoy doing that for other people's pieces, too. People who want to write, but they're uncertain about how to do it. So it's really fun.
We used to have writing teachers at the college, high school, do this writing exercise because what they said was, if you can say in 240 words what you really, really mean, then you can always expand that to a whole essay. But if you get the essence of something, you can do it in 240 words, you got it made.
Yeah.
I'm with Laurie. I love revising. Revising and editing. It's the best fun of all.
Why would you recommend listeners to submit pieces as well?
Everybody has a story.
Uh-huh.
I mean, everybody, you go to a restaurant, people are telling their stories. I love hearing people's stories, and that's the essence of it. I have a friend who was an animal trainer at Marine World Africa USA. He trained orangutans. He's a born storyteller, so I got him to do a few pieces about his dog and then the orangutan.
Right.
Done a couple. So it's just fun too.
It doesn't have to be exotic, though. I mean, it's nice to have an exotic topic, but most of our stuff is just everyday mundane things that we find of interest for some reason
You
or
mean
another.
buttons?
And that, what's that?
Buttons.
Yes, buttons. And it resonates with other people, and
It
I think
is.
that's the fun part, is the resonance.
Yes.
Two of us have written indirectly about Billy Collins. And Billy Collins has got the ability to take the mundane and put it into poetry. Everybody I know has that ability somewhere in them, or just need to encourage them to do it.
Yes.
Well, we're unfortunately run out of time, but listeners, you can contact us at firstpersonsingular@ksqd.org, and you can listen to lots of their and other people's stories on ksqd.org/first-person-singular. You've been listening to Laurie Corn, Alan Ritch, and Sally Gray talking about their participation in the 2-minute program on KSQD called First Person Singular, which airs Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays around 7:57 and 5:57 p.m.